Okay, time for another draw over video. It's been a while since I've done this, so I'm just going to kind of ad-lib it and plunge right in. Now, I was happy to receive a number of submissions from people, and this is one from Dave Pretorius, who goes by Red Eye Draws on Instagram. And so he sent me this letter, which I'll read in a second. I've lightly edited it down. It's nothing that personal. It's just, I think it's good to read to show the scope of what he's asking. And in fact, the letter itself is very nicely worded. And as I did in my other video, I commend Dave for having the guts to kind of put himself out there. Not that anything I say is, the be all and end all, but just to put himself out there, subject himself to a critique, and open himself to that. Because, when you look at the world of X and social media, it seems to me that you get these extremes. So on one hand, you have super likes, like, oh, that's so great, great. Okay, that's nice. It strokes the ego, but it doesn't make you advance. On the other hand, you have the nasty mean girls, it's the other side of emotionality, right? Either oh, you're so nice. It's like, and pretend like nothing's wrong. Don't say anything negative. Be all super Pollyanna, fake nice. And the other side is the super mean girls club, where everybody's like viciously nasty, scraping over each other for clicks and attention. And it's like a pile of dogs trying to climb the snow hill, that kind of analogy. And the whole thing is insane, because if you're an artist that wants to improve, I'm going to get onto my rantometer here and turn the rantometer up. But if you're an artist that wants to improve, what's your problem? Your problem is that you cannot just leap from A to Z and be some great master. You have to do it through incrementalism, through a series of steps. And the steps are learning bit by bit and expanding your knowledge and your skill. And you have to do that not only in generalities like the craft and all that, but you have to do that with examining your own work and turning inwards, which is again where the extremes of super nice or mean girls club, mean, nasty, vicious, it doesn't help you figure out, when you have your dark night of the individual soul with your own drawings, and you've drawn something and you kind of go, well, that's okay, but something's nagging at me. Something sucks about this, but I don't exactly know what to fix. That's where the rubber hits the road, as the saying goes. You have to redo it. The secret of good writing or great writing is rewriting. The secret of great drawing is redrawing. Is like either trace it over, turn it, flip it over and draw it on the back again, and then do that again, or on a layer on your computer, whatever it is, but just keep working at it until you figure out what actually objectively is better rather than what is worse. Now that can be a whole problem, because in this huge soup of influences on social media, you can sometimes lose your bearings. You actually have no goddamn idea which way is better. I mean, it's happened to me lots of times. You think you're improving something, you spend all kinds of time on it, and then you actually realize later, no, that's not good. So that's the lot of the creator, the artist. Which way is objectively better and which is worse. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that everything I say, by the way, in this video is objectively perfectly better. It's my take at one moment in time, and I'm trying to say something useful, in this case for Dave, to help him on his journey, and hopefully say something that's neutral from an objective, or as objective as I can be, objective craft point of view. Not just like a bias or a mean girls club, or like you use green and I don't like the color green, so what you did is bad, that kind of thing. Those are all subjective, biased. It's kind of what people call bad faith, but that's not a good term. It's really just an uninformed. You can have all kinds of uninformed opinions. Either a good one from Aunt Bessie, who thinks that everything you do is great. Sorry, Aunt Bessie, but we all have one of those, and that's nice for the ego. But and then we also have the nasty critiquers, like I said, who just will diss on everything you do. So going to the letter, Dave has said to me, and I lightly edited this, but Hi Paul, here's a link to a folder of some of my art for a draw-over video. I've included 3 types of work that I've done for your review. So one is a 3-page comic sample from my latest book. So that's this art here. And a recent cover. Now it was in color, but I like to do these live with no edits, so it's printed in black and white. A recent cover, it's for something called Kickboxer, and number 3 is a concept piece. Now, so another disclaimer at the beginning, if you want to call it that, is I don't know Dave. Dave, like I said, is brave enough to submit and open himself up, and that's how you learn. But everything I say is based on just what I see here and a look at his Instagram. The rest is like I don't know his story fully. I'll get into that in a moment. So I'm just going to do it off the cuff. So he says regarding the comic sample, and this is good to set up what he's asking for, because this is good. Like what he's done here is good, is that he's clarified for himself, and by writing to me, this is longer than some other people did. Because he's already like published, he's working, he's out there, so he's not a complete beginner, but he's still in the stage. We're all at this stage where you're looking for ways to improve. That's a good instinct. But what he's done is what I advised in other videos, and it's a good reminder, is that whenever you practice, you should have a goal. You should have a clarified goal. It's just like in training for athletics. If you're practicing sprints, I don't know, I'm not a sprinter, never was, but you might practice jumping out of the blocks quickly. You might practice longer runs. If you're a boxer like Rocky, you're hitting the heavy bag or you're hitting the speed bag or whatever. It's kind of like that. When you're doing drawing exercises, you should have a reason for doing it and a goal. So here he's articulating what he's struggling with, which is exactly right for seeking answers. So he says, in the comic sample, I think my biggest weakness is the storytelling. The book is wordless, so the visuals are doing a lot of heavy lifting, and I think some of it may be a little confusing for readers still. Can you please suggest some alternate panel layouts or shot selections that would help make the action clearer? Excuse me, and I'll try and do that. My one caveat is that I don't have a script of what you were trying to accomplish exactly, the like mental story of the action, which is then translated into shots. So that being said, since I don't know that story exactly, I can only reverse engineer out of what I could from these pages and then try and think of ways to improve it, rather than just knowing the raw story by itself and saying, okay, what was the optimal way to tell that in 3 pages? And in fact, there is no optimal way, because of course there's endless variations to anything. There's only kind of better and worse, whichever choices you make. So next thing is, he says, for the Kickboxer cover, I think the posing, that's this one here. Let me zoom in a bit. And I'll go back to these. I'm just reading the letter still. For the Kickboxer cover, I think the posing and composition could have been more dynamic. There's movement, but he still feels a bit stiff to me. Can you please suggest ways to add more energy to the pose, as well as some tips, and reduce the stiffness? Also, if you have any ideas on how to improve the overall composition of the cover, I'd love to hear them. And then number 3, lastly, is a concept I did a couple of years ago that has spawned a bunch of ideas for my next book. I'd like to do a few more of these sorts of pieces before diving into pages. I think my use of perspective in this one is only okay. Simple 1-point perspective, but some of the sizing feels off. What could be done to improve the layout, and do you have any tips going into future pieces like this to continue to establish the world I'm creating? Thank you for taking the time to look at my work, and I look forward to the feedback you provide, Dave Pretorius. Hope I pronounced your name right. Okay, so that's really good. I'm going to try and go back to these one by one, and I've got some other art of his from Instagram I took the liberty of printing out. Again, I'll say what I can off my top of my head, and try and sort of maybe draw and suggest some stuff too, as it occurs to me. I can't, of course, do a complete, exhaustive, be-all, end-all type thing, because if this was my art, I would do that. I would, do it over and over until you're not letting it go out the door, until you feel like there's nothing more you can do with it. And that, of course, can be a trap, because at some point you do have to let it go. But you want to put it through iteration. So I'm going to go to number 2 here. For the Kickboxer cover, I think the posing and composition could have been more dynamic. Just checking that I'm in frame. What I'm going to do here is try and keep the original one to the right. Get my little guys out of the way here. All right, original one's to the right, and I'm going to work over to whatever extent I can. So I like these thick, chunky, clutch barrel, chunky things. I always have to mention Alex Toth at least once. So he told me this in a video long ago. It's like, work with big, chunky pencils, son. Not in a video, in a postcard. He told me, son, get a big, chunky clutch barrel pencil, and that's what I like to use. And he's right, because it's, I've said this in other videos, it's a way of avoiding getting fussy, and you just think of the big shapes. Jack Kirby famously worked with a carpenter's pencil, one of those big flat pencils. I used to have one here somewhere, but to show you. Anyway, first thing I would say here is silhouette. And again, I'm saying this cold because I don't know the exact brief of what this cover was supposed to be, but it looks like a virtual reality gamer guy. He's got a VR headset on, and he's doing a big punching camera. In the background, there's like a boxing ring on the different screens. And there's some booze, Coors beer, it looks like, something like that. One of them's tipped over. What I'm doing here is I'm analyzing the elements that he's put into his cover, right? And then you work with each of those as components. Top third would probably be for the logo. I don't have that logo, so I'm just going on this as a raw cover. So you've got this gamer guy, and he's got wires coming out the back of his helmet, and he's punching at camera. His other fist is back like he's going to do another follow-up punch. He's jabbing with one hand, and he's going to do the big punch from behind. So first thing I'd say is silhouette. If I'm going to just do this lightly, I'm ignoring the wires. I'm just checking that this is showing up on camera. I only printed out one of these, so I want it dark enough. But I want to show this principle. If you go around this silhouette, does that show up on camera? He says to himself, yes, it is. That's vitally important. Okay, so if I was to black that in, which I'm not going to do because I only did one printout. See, it's about silhouetting. This silhouette doesn't show punching. If you just black this whole silhouette I just traced around in as a blob, a black, dark blob of ink, you cannot tell really that the guy's punching. He's not projecting out. It's just and you can't really tell like a VR helmet. I might not even, in the time I have and the way I'm doing this, I'm going to erase that so it doesn't distract me. I might not have time to do a complete draw over of each of these, because then I'd make like a 2-hour video, which I don't want to do, frankly. But what I would do here is, you've got guy, and I would advise construction drawing, because some of this I'm having trouble with the construction, and I'll try and talk about that as I go. I would put his fist out much more. I'm not going to draw all the details. I'm just going to try and do the big chunky. And I would get some thumb in there, I think, for pure fistiness. Now, you've got his forearm coming up, so even though if he's a skinny guy, which it looks like he's supposed to be kind of skinny, you'd still have it wider. And then this is okay, probably the other fist hiding back here. But you could also put it out. Depends on what pose you want, but I'm going to leave that there for now. I would emphasize knuckles in the silhouette. He's got knuckles over here, but I would play those up a lot more. Gives you more danger. He's got gritted teeth, that's pretty good, although I don't know if you can see again in the video. The lips are kind of looking like they're like pouty. Make them curled in like they're snarling. You know what? I'm going to do this with a marker because it's going to show up better. This is just a big broken down old brush pen, so there's going to be no finesse to this. Snarly. He's got the head down, which I don't want to lose, which is good. Except in the original one, it looks like this is kind of supposed to be a center line, this line here. But it's confusing me because there's nothing, it's not drawn volumetrically. I'm going to jump around here because there's a lot to be said. Like I said, I could probably make an hour video just on this drawing. Not to be cruel to Dave, because by the way, that's, you know, that's, like I said at the beginning, it's not about being cruel or brutal. It's about opening yourself up to examining what you did. But I'm looking for kind of construction here. And I'm looking at the big forms, like this idea. The big forms, the volumes. This is my famous rib cage I use. The volumes. So here you've got this VR headset guy. And this thing would be a natural to use for a center line, construction line. But you're looking for where the eyes are. So I guess these are the eyes. There's these metal eye patch things over. And again, this is kind of just going to be rough, but I'm looking for, this is the axis of this. That's good. And a main form thing is this band across the top here. It's very drawn very flat. It somehow needs to be more like it's got a volume and you're understanding what form it is clearly. Like if it's projecting up and it's like that. If it's a form that's thinning down as it comes around and connecting to this earpiece, there's a strap here. I'm not going to go in again. I guess I keep doing these disclaimers. It's a fairly detailed design, so it would take a lot longer to correct everything. But what I'm after here is very good volumetric drawing. If you look at people like Alex Toth, my hero, and lots of the other older school guys, they're all about very, very careful drawing. Now, they might do the jazzy rendering on top, but there's a very clear construction drawing underneath. And there's a very good awareness of silhouette. Like here, this guy's got this hair, it looks like frizzy hair coming out the back. So that's a natural opportunity to do a very, it could be whatever you want, but you know, to do a clear bit of interesting silhouette. And then you've got all these cables, which are, again, are going all up in here. There's all these extra ones. I find that kind of distracting. So I don't even know if I'd include those. They look like frizzy spaghetti. I would just leave those out. And then you've got others in the background. I don't know if it shows up in this print. It's quite a dark print, but there's other lines coming from these computers. And I'll get to that in a second, but I probably wouldn't even include that. Just maybe add a few more here if you have to. Because it's giving a dynamic line coming into here. And if you have more stuff here, it's taking away from that because it's grabbing your eye. It's all about where you take the eye. So anyway, I started doing some of this anatomy. I might not ink all of this, but you've got his elbow down here. Got his deltoid there. He's got some kind of American flag or something on here. Then you want him pulling. So see how this shape is oval around the socket, the ripped off sleeve of this, whatever it is? Make it pulling. So it gives the action, right? And you can even have like force, like these are pulling away. So it makes it feel like there's action. See the pull lines here? And the same for this vest he's got. You could have it back. This is good, this loop here, but you need to show it more clearly. And then the silhouette of this needs to come out, in my opinion, something more like that. Like it's swinging out, like there's motion. And then his action is against that, so you got pull lines, like twist lines here. You've got his belt. His knee could probably be up more. and you're going to have compression here. And his belt might be over here a bit more to get more twist. So you're thinking about the center line, right? See, it's twisting up there. So that gets rotation in the figure. And then the leg you could do different things with, but it looks like he's kind of partly bending it, like he's springing up. And then I'm going to get his leg under there. And I don't know if you can see in the gray here, but the shoe is very rubbery. Probably missed an opportunity to make a much more chunky boot. And maybe it's a running shoe, I can't tell. And then there's camouflage pattern. There's like an extra line here on this. I don't know what that's doing in the ink. But analyzing the action, he would have pull lines here. Bit of compression there. You're analyzing the force because you're trying to figure out where the minimum number of wrinkles you want to put. You don't want to overcrowd everything. And like I said, I'm thinking about silhouette here, see? I don't even know if I'm going to get to all the other ones, Dave, but I'll see what I can do. Maybe I'll make a part 2 if this video gets too long, because I did want to analyze all of these different things. So I'm just thinking out loud here. I might do part 2. Now, for continuity's sake, see the jacket over here? It's not worked out as a three-dimensional thing. It's like I want to see this come around, and then where's the other side of the jacket gone? Like as if you were drawing this like glass transparently. Some pull lines there. Is the jacket like, what is it doing? He's got his shoulder up. Animators call this action analysis. You're analyzing what's actually happening if you really did this, which is a good thing to do. If you've got a mirror at home, actually do the pose, put any similar piece of clothing on, look at it in the mirror, look at it, feel it in yourself, like what's actually happening. Whether you're drawing a fist or whether you're drawing, you know, a pose, or whether you're drawing motion of something, you do action analysis and try and actually figure out in your mind what is going on. Where are the pull lines? Like say here, is there going to be a pull line from this guy's hip? Probably, because that's where the force is coming from. See, his hips sort of rotated back, the torso's rotating against it. You might actually even put a shadow down here to show that volume. Stylize the shadow or make it realistic. He's got his muscle there. And overall, you can see here what I tried to do is what I was saying earlier, is project his fist out. You can't go right off the page probably. But if you're working with this established drawing, that's what I would do, is this has more projection, and so does that. It makes a more interesting silhouette shape, and that's what you're always trying to do, is make clarity. Clarity is the thing, clarity. Oops, I'm not being clear because I did that off screen because I'm zoomed in. Clarity, silhouette. Now I'm going to jump to some of the background stuff here. I could say more about gizmos and things, but again, like I keep saying, it'd be too long. Now look, here we have a situation of perspective. Okay, so Dave's got it looks to me like in the original drawing, our eye level is somewhere like here. So we're looking down, we're looking like at his fist and teeth, which is okay. But we're looking really way down on this curved desk or whatever it is. And to me, that's just not dramatic. Like, and you don't need to really see anything on this desk. So I think it would be much more effective to have a low angle point of view. And again, I'm gonna kind of wing this, but really, again, if it was my cover, I'd probably experiment and, you know, mess around till I got something. But this is really always, it's like Wally Wood's 22 panels, a low angle thing for dramatic upshot. The dramatic upshot, low angle, it's always a crowd pleaser. And you've got all these different monitors. I would sort of simplify it maybe, working with the perspective. See here, like we're gonna have a perspective like this, going up. And it also helps to funnel the viewer's eye, these lines radiating into the character. And it gives like a feeling of speed lines. So you could do any number of things. Like I could have a monitor. This is what I would experiment with if I was doing this on the computer, probably on a layer with a monitor. So if I'm taking the shape of the screen as a rectangle, it becomes a design element. So I've got one over here. I'd probably want to try and balance it somehow, maybe a slightly smaller one over here, because this is the limit of our drawing. And then we've got kind of cool techie stuff. I don't know if these are supposed to be, they look kind of older school monitors, but I don't know if that's intentional. And he's got these support things. You could hint at a support system maybe if you want to get, and you're working with the, oops, you're working with the perspective here, which is going this way, which is like if you're centered roughly here, then the vertical lines are going to swing in that way. So you might want to have something like that. And if this is all dark back here, you might just want to put some lights and things as design elements. So this is the way I would do it. There's infinite different ways to do these things, of course. And like I said at the beginning, my approach is not the be all and end all. What you want is just a strong cover that's graphically pleasing, that sells. You know, it hits you. It's a comic book cover. You want power, and you want clarity. Like I said here, clarity. You want people to be able to read it, and this applies to what I'll say about the comics pages too. I want people to be able to read it and not be confused when they see it. So here I'm in the same position as I want to balance. So what am I going to put over here? Because you can't just have a big empty black space. Everything that you draw is not only a literal drawing, it's a compositional element. And I'm jumping around here, but I've got the desk here, so maybe you have a bit of a smaller monitor here. Maybe some controls, keyboards. And you might have other incidental elements. If these beer bottles were important, which I assume they are, you might have it shown this way. And then the other one here, like if the guy's drinking, if that's part of it, you might add more if it's a story point that the guy's been drinking, and you can show the beer dripping off here as an element. Anytime you put in a new compositional element, you're always thinking of the silhouette. So like I would think of this, not only the silhouette of each bottle, but as a combined unit. If you can see that, like that as a unit, the spill, and is he jumping up? So this becomes like almost a story thing. Is he jumping up angrily and punching at thin air? I guess that's what you do with a VR helmet. Do I need some supports for this table just to add some visual interest? I don't know, you could. Something like that. You could have a bit of wiring under there. Depends on how busy you want to make it. This would probably be mostly dark. Do I want some motion lines? Maybe. You might not do that in the modern idiom of comics. They don't always use all of these things, although sometimes, and not always on a cover. And lastly, probably I would balance this out with some, either make this dark, but again, you might want some kind of tech here, like could I maybe have a smaller screen going up to show diminishment perspective, and then you could have like some trunk line cables maybe working with the perspective, and again taking you into this guy as a compositional line. And depending on what you want to show back here, you could do anything from have more of these lights going off. They could be in perspective as if there's a wall there, or they could be flat. You could even have something cool like some mesh screens that you would probably color down dark, you know, like they're cooling vents. Who knows? But depends on your personal proclivities. I like vents and all that stuff, but you get your own sort of personal vocabulary. So, okay, that's enough for that. Those are kind of my suggestions for the Kickboxer cover. And really what it is I'm giving you, trying to reveal concepts of how I think about it and how I believe when I reverse engineer and look at the greats, Alex Toth, Joe Kubert, all these people, how did they think? That's the important thing, is what were the principles they were using in their mind as they made choices? Because it's all about choices. And like I said at the beginning of this video, if you want to get better over either overall in your, as the years go by, or in one individual drawing like we're doing here, you have to make incremental decisions about what's an improvement and then try and figure out which way is up. It's always in steps or progression. Usually, unless you have those days where some miracle happens and you do this amazing, perfect drawing out of the blue, usually you don't just get that instant jump. You have to kind of progressively figure it out. Now, the more you get those principles in your head, things like silhouette, clarity, posing, line of action, which I didn't mention, but again, there's too many. If you get those in your head, you're using those to analyze what you're doing as you do it. And presumably, with practice, you go down fewer wrong alleys. Things like tangents and confusing. So actually, I'm at about half an hour here, so probably what I'll do is I'll have a look at this, and then I'll probably do a part 2 with the storytelling, because that's a whole thing I could get into with Dave's comic. And then there's some other people too that have submitted, which I'll eventually get to in case they end up watching this. There's 3 or 4 submissions, so I can only do so many of these so fast. Now this is, what Dave said is, he said, this is a concept I did a couple of years ago that has spawned a bunch of ideas for my next book. I'd like to think my use of perspective in this one is only okay. Simple at one point, but some of the sizing feels off. What could be done to improve the layout? And do you have any tips going into future pieces like this to continue to establish the world I'm creating? Okay, so I think this is good. And it's kind of up my alley. It's noirish, future noir, as they call it. I'm going to just sit with this and look at it as you are and try and figure out, as you would if you created this, if you were Dave. This is what I do when I'm me creating something. And I've done the first pass or even finished things, and I go, how can I make this better? So then you got to just sit with it and get it almost into a meditative point of view. And what it means is you have to figure out what to keep and what to throw out, what to improve and modify, and what to just chuck out. And that can be tough because you get emotionally attached. So here we have a noir inked piece with a lot of black. And what I would say, first of all, off the cuff is, I like this, it's cool. There's a lot of cool elements, but it's confusing. It lacks clarity. It lacks what you call the read at a glance quality. And it means if I reduce this down, which you can't hear with the video, but if you took this on your screen and reduced it way down to this big, could you still make out right away what it is? If you look at really great classic comic art from people like Joe Kubert, Toth, Nick Carty, all kinds of them, if you take a cover and put it across the room on the shelf and look at it, you can still figure out what it is. It's because the silhouettes are clearly considered, and the layout is clear. It has a quality called clarity, and hopefully I'm being clear when I'm trying to define clarity. So here there are too many things at once, and the use of black is in all the levels, okay? And the lighting is very inconsistent, and short of re-inking this all, which again I don't have time to do, I'm going to probably just make some suggestions here and do what I can to kind of work over this a bit. Checking that I'm zoomed in properly. Get my trusty chunky pencil. So we've got different elements. Let's analyze the elements. We've got figures. I think I'll go back to this for now. We've got figures. Guy in the foreground, he's got some kind of, see again, clarity. I can't tell what it is. He's got a phone and there's something behind him here. I don't know what that is, because it's conflicting with, is this some kind of futuristic phone? I guess so. He's a cyber guy. Fine, that's fun, He's got glasses, but he's kind of a bit small if he's a foreground piece, and if he's important, if he's a foreground element. This guy's also kind of equally sized, so it kind of kills the depth. You want one bigger, which I'll probably do in a second. And again, if you're trying to create, like I like a storytelling moment or the implication of that in a cover, like the classic covers, not just posing. And this seems to be a scene, like it's a snapshot. But you can take a photo like this at any given night on a street in any big city, and you'll have random people going by doing whatever. But that's not a scene that you do on a cover or even on a concept piece. You want to try and imply something going on to intrigue the reader. And on a comic book cover, like the classic old ones, it's what I call a suspense story moment. Crystallized into one image, you would have a scene that intrigued you and drew you in. It's like those Man-Bat Neil Adams covers, you know, the one where Man-Bat has grabbed his bride and is running towards camera shrieking, and Batman's chasing him behind. And as a kid, you go, what the heck is going on here? I got to read this comic and find out. So I don't know if that was the intent on this piece. This looks like a sort of Blade Runner-esque cyberpunk street. There's a woman on a hoverboard. And again, going back to analyzing the elements, there's characters, there's buildings. It looks like there's some kind of vehicle up here, a hover vehicle, but I can't tell clearly. And there's some other buildings back here with windows, street lamps. I'm isolating the elements. And again, it's confusing because they've all been inked very dark, but there's no clear sense of lighting that's consistent, which of course on a street scene, you would get multiple light sources. So it can be very confusing. And this is a challenging type of topic. Now we have signs, some of which have words and lettering or numbers are going to always attract your attention. So this is VHS, buy, sell, rent, XXX, you know, there's Asian lettering here, but this sign is blank. Now, I don't know if that's because on the cover there was something going to be added later. I'm just going on what I see here. And again, a blank sign here. So these two kind of attract your attention because they're blank. And then there's things what you call tangent and staging problems, kind of jumping around here. But you see how this guy's head is touching this line? These are kind of no-nos. The guy's head is touching this box, and the box is centered behind him, whatever that is. So these are just things you just don't want to do, because what it does is it locks your eye in there. It creates a contact point, and you naturally, it's like a principle of the human mind, which I talk about on Instagram on some of my art principles posts. And I always say this, but I want to do more videos on this. It's a thing called the 2D language, and it's also in the human mind, is that when you have two things apart, there's no relationship. As they get closer, you start to wonder what's going to happen. And then, of course, when they touch or interact, it depends on the nature of that, but that creates interest. So you have to be careful to use that properly as a creator. Like here, you've got this touching, and it's not about being fussy. It's just, it creates stopping points for the eye where it's like awkward. Your eye can't flow around and then stop at the places where you want it to stop. Now, as far as perspective goes, it looks like the eye level would be about here. I'm going to analyze this over here now. We'll keep this in frame. Let's see if I can do a bit of draw over, because it's supposed to be called the draw over. To find a vanishing point in a photo, you could take some of the main lines that you can isolate. And I've got this one here. And this one, if I infer from the top of this, it looks like it's going here. So it looks like the vanishing point is kind of here. But that is a problem also with this structure. Like, I would have liked to have seen this submitted, and it's not a big critique, Dave, but it would have been easier for me to analyze this without the blacks and the inking, but that's okay. Just the sheer structure, because the sheer structure of the line work itself is what really is going to give you something powerful or not, is what will work or not. That's what I'll attempt to do here. So if it was me, I would just think in terms of sheer silhouettes. You've got sunglasses guy here. He's on the phone. Break this out more. I'm going to do this roughly because I'm going sort of long. You could have this guy turned or whatever. I don't know if that matters, but these are kind of sub things you would work out. You've got cyber elements, so you might want to put those like you have. That's good in the silhouette. I don't know if he's talking in his phone or not. This guy's not talking. He's not doing anything. And what's he got? Some kind of shirt. Is it ragged? I don't know. And, you know, here's his chest. Is he holding up this phone? Just think of each piece as a silhouette. I'm going to kind of just wing this. And again, you know, at this stage, it's not going to be super fancy drawing. It's going to be working out the placement and basic silhouettes and sizing of each element and how you can get them to work together. Now, I don't know about a story point. This guy, is he related to this guy, or is he just a walk-on that's walking by? I don't know, but you could make it interesting by, first of all, make him lower. That's what I do anyway. He's got this thing. He could be looking over, which you can't really see here. He could be looking over at this guy and establishing some kind of connection. Make it more clear that he's got his hand in his pocket, because that creates intrigue. Like, what is he doing? Has he got a gun in there? He's a bit like off this guy. Make him leaning in. He's walking. Make his coat moving a bit. I haven't drawn the character properly, but you get the idea. Make him frowning. And he's scoping this guy. You could have his head down like you had. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just drawing this quickly. And so you've got these two elements, right? So just think of these as silhouettes. I'm just scribbling over that, you know. They're just sheer shapes. So they're balancing each other. Now you don't want the same size here. Like you've got this hoverboard girl, woman, person. And I want to have end up with a lower angle. So I would put down here and make it her smaller. I'm going to do this crudely. And you've got some hoverboard lines, which are fun. They become a composition element, but they're kind of going off like the bottom. It would be cooler, I think, to have them swooping in. Sort of like that, maybe. Again, you'd have to probably play with some of this. You've got her hair, but it's not going the way with the motion. If you look at her hair here, it should be swooping, in my opinion. Give it action. It's swooping behind like she's moving fast, right? And now we've got this thing of the background crowd. So this gets into, I would put the horizon line down here. Something like down here, or even maybe a bit lower. Yeah, these two guys. And I'd have to experiment with that, and I put this little crowd as a blob. If they're not doing anything important, they could even almost be a complete silhouette. Just enough that you can see, okay, there's a bunch of people. If they're doing something, you'd have to articulate that. There's a mob of gangsters that are about to advance and create a problem. If they have, a big sword, you're going to show that in the silhouette, or guns or something. But again, I don't know the story. And again, here, it's a low angle type thing. It creates drama. You're looking up at them. Then you're going to get into staging elements back in space. So you want to put big things close and smaller things far away, but you also want to keep believable scaling. So this street lamp, which seems to be kind of I don't know if it's a futuristic street lamp, you might choose to put that kind of bigger and up close and taking you, not centered on this guy, you can have some lines here, but taking you into this. Cables, I don't know. You might put a smaller one here and smaller one there. That gives you depth. You often find that having at least 3 elements, like 2 isn't enough to give a lot of depth, but it can, but it's better to have like 3 going of the same thing going in the distance. And then here I would suggest articulating what the overall form is. See, I can't tell over here. Is there the plane of a building? It looks like, but it looks like you might have done this off a photo, so you haven't like re-engineered it all for yourself. But let's say we have basically a plane here, and you've got a doorway of some kind, which is framing this guy here, and it's going to take you down into, this part of it's going to take you down into hoverboard girl, which is going to connect you over here. You're creating a flow. The line here is broken by hoverboard. And you might want to make this sign bigger. You could have a cool sign there. Maybe even some supporting structure of some kind, you know. And it's just very complicated, and I'm not being mean, but it's very gunky. There's just tons of stuff. But you should make it clear, like, what each thing is. Like, if this is a building, and then this is a big sign above, which can be cool with neon lights or bulb lights with maybe a neon sign here, you know, sign, neon sign, IGN, and lights. And again, maybe as you've sort of shown, but it's not really very clear. And then you're staging this one back, so you got to be careful how you create this overall silhouette here, all this stuff. It's still, you still want it vertical, taking you down. So you might do something like this. This is where if you work from photographs, they're great for a jumping off point. I think, again, Alex Toth said this in one of his postcards. He'll look at a ton of reference, and I learned this, and I did this because I realized myself, thinking about it, that it works. You look at a ton of reference, you study it carefully just as reference, whether on the computer or you print some of it out or in books or whatever, photos, different things. You absorb it, you try and get it in your head and remember it, and then you put it away and you draw. Because if you slavishly try and trace and copy, you get this 50-50 mixture of partly photo, partly your own composition, and it's often very uncomfortable. So in the end, you have to just take the bull by the horns, as the saying goes, and compose the thing yourself. A composition is a creation. And if you create along the principles of clarity, storytelling, what I'm trying to explain here is focal points, like character is a focal point, take your eye into it, make pathways to secondary things. Maybe I could have some things here to help with the perspective. Those could be signs, they could be a grill. You can make smaller ones here, which helps with diminishment. See, because your eye is going to compare. And then here, again, for depth, you want, okay, so if I got, it looks like the roof line of a building here that then cuts back up. That's fine. And then you've got a further away building, which I would go like this. And then you've got this VHS sign is very distracting because you can't tell what plane it's on. If it was way back here at the edge of this distant building, now that I've made it distant, it would have to be immense, and it's conflicting. Like, it's got its own scale, but if it's the same visual size here as this one, it's making them on the same plane, which if it's not on the same plane because it's way further away, you shouldn't do that. Don't put equal things of equal size that are at different distances. So I would just either forego that completely, probably, or maybe put, if I need the VHS sign for some reason in the story, you could put it flat here, you know, VHS, or you could have it sticking out. But probably to create a sense of the space, I would show some of the, I don't know if this is still clear, it's getting a bit gunky itself. I would have these buildings stepping down into the distance to work with the perspective. And then back here, it looks like there's a cross street. So fine, you know, you're gonna have a bunch of signs here saying different things. And you're gonna have the partitions of the stores, and maybe some smaller signs or what have you. But you wanna be careful that that's clearly articulated. And then, again, I'm going off what you have, trying to read your intent. But you've got this whole thing as a sort of foreground piece. You could have a midground piece if you wanted. For example, you can have a kind of a medium-sized building here of some kind. With the windows, you'd have to pay very careful attention to scale of how big the windows would be. You know, with some cyber junk maybe. And if you want a flying car, which is good, this flying car got lost here. Have it coming out as a composition element, maybe headlights, whatever it is, design. Is it a DeLorean? And it looks like this could be mist back here or smoke, which I like actually, because you could use that as an excuse to blank out the background around this car. Say you've got shadow underneath it. You could have, you know, smoky going up, which gives you that Blade Runner thing, and it gives you a reason to just blank that out. If you want to explain it visually, you could have more chimneys here, and you could have more streamers. Make sure I'm staying in frame as I enthusiastically work on this. Now you've got, I'm not going to do the VHS sign like I said there. You might have more people here, I don't know, depends on what you want to show. But back here you could do a number of things. You could, in this negative space back here, the distance, you could make it all just one color. It could just be sky, but if you want to show a big city, you could have just like lights being pulled out of the smog, imply lights, you know. These patterns could serve to take you down into this car. Then you could do smaller ones, and then even smaller ones as if they were between gaps of buildings. You could have the occasional like neon sign on a building. And then you can arrange that whatever way you want, like, but it has to work with the composition. And I could have put silhouettes of buildings. Anyway, I think that's going to be it for this video, because even though I didn't want to, this is almost an hour. And it takes a while, I guess, to articulate in words things that are just intuitive as you're drawing. But my plea is, as I said in other videos, you don't want to get over analytical, but you want to be thinking carefully about what you're doing as you do it, and not just go into full drawing. See, that's the trick, is you have to kind of restrain yourself and use different modes. Like, it's like when you do thumbnails, or when you write an outline for a story, you're in thumbnail mode. You're just thinking of the big structure and big picture. It's the same with drawing. It's very easy to jump ahead and start doing all the final brush inking and rendering and drawing and noodling around. Believe me, I've done it endless times. That's how I know this, is that you have to restrain yourself and make sure each prior stage works, which is where doing this kind of thing, I don't know in Dave's case how many times he did this, but I assume maybe not that much, because there's probably an eagerness to get into that final look, the final inking. But it's really in the foundational aspects, like I'm trying to flesh out here. It's in the foundational aspects of what you're doing that the success lies. Like, it's not in the final fancy rendering. Like, when you have a strong composition, it almost renders itself, because it's not going to depend on how finessed you make that exact brush line. And again, look at some of the people like Frank Miller, or even some of David Mazzucchelli's work. If you look at some of his art, it's not even slickly inked. Like, he's not doing the perfect thick, thin brush line thing, although I'm sure he could do it. He, like Alex Toth, and he probably learned this from people like Toth, is that it's the design that matters. It's not the final ink line. If you want to do that, that can look very beautiful, and it has its own flavor that gives a quality to the work. But if you want that more rough-hewn thing, the success is not in just doing a ragged, rough brush line. It's in the composition, the arrangement, and the artifice of that. But the hidden artifice, which is there's a strong structure hidden beneath that rougher exterior. Someone like Frank Miller is a perfect example of this, that he clearly knows drawing, anatomy, structure. He's gotten a lot kind of odder, I would say, now that he's older and some of the things he's done. But if you look at some of his best work, it's really very carefully thought out and structured, and then he just inks it like he's just abandoned and spontaneous. And that's the best stuff. They make it look easy. I would say the same thing about Bill Watterson in Calvin and Hobbes, which is very cartoony. But underneath it is it's such a clear understanding of storytelling, posing, comedy, everything. It's not just in the surface that people see. And again, I mean, you could extend this as far as you want. Look at Jack Kirby. It's always about the splayed fingertips, right? And the squiggles and the Kirby cosmic crackle dots in space. But Jack Kirby, the brilliance of him is not in that. It's in his storytelling, his posing, his understanding of how to use different shots, create suspense. All that kind of stuff is what made him so great, really. The other stuff is icing on the cake. I mean, I love it, and I grew up with it. New Gods, the Fantastic Four, all that stuff, the gizmos and things. But really, when you look at it, what made him so great is that he understood storytelling, and he loved story and storytelling and staging. And that's why he could get away with, really in many cases, completely outrageous anatomy and stuff like that, exaggeration. But it made it work because he was going with the emotion and the dynamics, and it really put it across in such this still medium we have. So anyway, I guess I could go on more about that, but that's my analysis of 2/3 of what Dave asked me. I will probably do a second follow-up with the storytelling, which I hadn't planned on, but that's how it goes. So thanks for listening. If you have any follow-up questions or comments, please add them to this video, and please like, subscribe, and if you like it even more, please share it anywhere you can. Thanks again.